could you imagine me sitting here like this in dolphin shorts? Hi, how are you? Let's talk about my mental health. My family survived a Holocaust and a genocide. Be careful. They were thrown off the train. The train was blown up, and then they were put on a coal train, beaten and assaulted, and everything was taken from them. I have always felt that everything was my fault. I have always felt that if I wasn't here, if I didn't do it, everybody else would be okay. You know, we all have our fears, and for me, people are my biggest fear. People aren't going to like me. That scares me. You may not like me. That scares me. My dear Gregory, why didn't you pick yourself? And I went, I didn't know I could. Like, what? I didn't know I could. So that's the moment that wrecked me. Because I'm like, what? I could pick me? I had no clue.
Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. You're in for a roller coaster. My name is Patrick Custer, and I'm so excited to get this conversation, or I should say continue it, because we should have had the cameras rolling since you walked in the door. But my friend, actor, and many other things, Gregory Zarian. Is it Zarian or Zarian?
Zarian.
Zarian.
Thank you for asking.
Yes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you're here today. You just started to ask about the pillow, and I love that you just pulled it over and, you have it there, because that's a representation of how I hope our conversation can be, where you're just as comfortable as can be, and that it doesn't feel procured, and we are just, open it, hit it if you need to. Thank you.
Do you like how I'm behaving now? I'm being so good right now.
I liked how you were behaving before.
Hi, spray tan.
Wait, I'm going to need a nickname before you leave, but I feel like you need to get to know me a little bit better before you develop one.
What makes you think I don't have one?
Well, I didn't say that I don't think you have one. I said, I think you need to get to know me a little bit better before you set on one and tell it to me. So I said earlier that Gregory is an actor and many other things, and I would like to add to that. The internet has not yet added this, but I think that comedian would be appropriately.
I don't know what you're saying at all.
See, and
because here's why you're saying that. It's because when I walked in and you were upstairs, getting presentable, I was in running shorts. And I said to the lovely spray tan, hey, you know what? It's good that I'm not in dolphin shorts and not wearing underwear. She went, what? And I said, they're loose flowing shorts. And I said, could you imagine me sitting here like this in dolphin shorts? Hi, how are you? Let's talk about my mental health.
I mean, we could, but fortunately, I overpack. So,
yes, and I'm wearing your pants. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, you're more than welcome. I'm glad they're not too big for you. So
they are. Oh,
well,
but it's not.
It's not noticeable, and nobody would have known.
No, I clipped the back.
Oh wow. Well, but so everyone knows, Gregory Zarian's waist is at least 4 inches smaller than mine. So.
But hey, listen, we all have our things.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of all having our things.
Yes.
My gosh. No, not those things. So, all right.
Talk to me.
Yeah. Like, where do we start with your story? Because, tell me about your dad from earliest memory as a child.
Ugh, I hate you. I'll start with, both parents are immigrants. Dad came from Armenia. So I'm half Armenian, half German. Our mother came from Berlin, Germany. She survived World War II. Our grandfather was, I say the word invited, but back then, because I've also done my due diligence and done my research, you were either Nazi, you were for the Nazi party, or you weren't. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather was so not part of the Nazi party. He thought it was crap. So when the war broke out, I say he was invited to participate with the party, and he didn't want to. He believed in what he believed in, and it was nothing Hitler involved. He basically told them to fuck off. Took mom and grandma to Poland, and on their way out of the city, they were thrown off the train. The train was blown up out of the city, so they possibly could have died. And then they were put on a coal train, and my grandma was beaten and assaulted and everything was taken from them. So my grandparents and my mom survived World War II. And what's beautiful about hearing that from my mom, and then, as I was saying earlier, got to spend a summer in Berlin, Germany, working on a series. And the tour guide, as she was talking about the war and what was happening, at the very end, she was very emotional. And she said, I just want to let you all know one thing. I am German. We are not Nazis. My family's not a part of the Nazi party. Mm-hmm. There are Germans and there are Nazis. And what I think is so prevalent right now in the world is demystifying all of it. You know, there's people that are Israeli, and then there's Jews. Mm-hmm. You know, it's diving deep into the question of the differences, the distinctions, and really wondering what that is. So yeah, Mom survived World War II, and then our father and our family survived the Armenian Genocide. Wow. So when people, can I cuss on this?
You can say whatever you want.
When people fuck with me, I'm like, listen, my family survived a Holocaust and a genocide, be careful. You know, so yeah. And my parents were immigrants, so we were brought up with a really strong hand. We were brought up with thank you and please. We were brought up with manners. You know, my mom got to this country when she was 19. My dad, when he was a teenager, his father was dying, and he was with my grandma and my aunt, and they were taking a boat from Armenia. They landed in Boston. It was either stay on the boat trip and start a new life, or stay there and be with his father, who was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. And they chose to come to this country to have a new life.
Wow.
And my dad then took a car from Boston, landed here in Hollywood, and went to college, took care of my grandma and my aunt. And his best friend invited my mom, my dad's best friend invited my mom to a surprise party for my dad. They met in October. My mom slipped him her number. Got married in February. My older brother came in November. And then 4 years later, my twin and I came.
Wow.
And, you know, his dad died when he was a kid. And our father would always say, I never heard I love you from my dad. My dad was brought up in the Middle East. And my grandmother was a professional piano teacher. She was a single mother of my aunt and my dad was precocious. He was like all boys, and I can tell just by looking at you that you're a punk too. I mean, we're punks. Like, I think little boys are fuckers, and I think, you know, we're just boys, and my father was just a boy, and my grandmother was so afraid of my father just being a boy that somebody would take him and hurt him. So my grandmother, she tried to put the fear of God into him so that he wouldn't go out and play at night, so he wouldn't go out and do something. We become part of what was taught to them, taught to them. So our father...
he was taught that love means...
to scare the shit out of your kids. So my father, who didn't have a father, who basically was the adult to my aunt and my grandma, brought them from Boston after they landed in this country to Glendale, California, and really opened up the doors to the possibility of the American dream.
Yeah.
You know, my parents...
What made him, can I ask you really quick, what made him decide to go from Boston, like all the way across the country? Like
there were some guys that wanted to come to California, and I want to say, and I could ask my aunt, but I want to say his cousin or somebody that he knew, a bunch of guys just came to LA. He basically was dropped off on Western and Sunset Boulevard. He looked up, he saw a billboard of an Armenian dentist. He called the dentist. They took my dad in, because one thing that I'm really proud of is the culture of my heritage. Mm-hmm. You know, Armenians are all about family. They are about doing anything for anyone that says, hi, I'm Armenian. There was this rich culture that people were talking about.
Yeah.
And we all want what we can't have.
Yep.
So my dad made a phone call. They took my dad in. They then introduced my dad to another family who ended up becoming my older brother's godparents. My father then got a job, which then turned into another job, which then he then created home and auto centers. There were car repair shops, and then he created the idea of when you're getting your car repair, come inside and buy a refrigerator, a ring, a bracelet. He had a chain of them. He consolidated them. He then put his money into real estate.
Wow.
And became one of the biggest developers here in Los Angeles. And then he became, at the moment of his passing, was known as one of the most celebrated Armenian American politicians in the country.
That's amazing. What did he do in politics?
He was the mayor of Glendale. 16 years on the city council, 4 terms as mayor. Still, that legacy has never been beat. And he then was on the transportation board. Arnold Schwarzenegger called him specifically and said, "I want you to be on my transportation board." And he, my dad was, politics in Glendale were his next child. Mm-hmm. There's 3 boys, but Glendale was his 4th child, and then politics was his 5th child. I mean, he was known as the people's mayor when he passed. And people loved my dad.
Yeah.
You know, and for us it was different because he was my dad.
Right.
And he was, he was tough, and he didn't have what people have now. There was no conversation. He didn't know what it was to raise 3 boys, and I'm one of 3 boys, and I'm a fucker. You know what I'm saying? My twin brother and I are troublemakers. We have an older brother that we're 3 boys. Boys are precocious. They like to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. We drank, we smoked. I've been sober for 19 years. Tons of drugs.
Yeah.
For years. And I got arrested when he was mayor. So when I was arrested, and I always used to be afraid of this, but in sobriety, you talk about your past and you talk about being of service to somebody. Mm-hmm. I was embezzling money from a department store, and I got caught. I owned up to more money than I took at that one moment.
Was it because you didn't know exactly how much it had been at that point?
I took $60.
Oh, okay.
However, I admitted to stealing $3,500. And here's why I am happy for me for saying that, because I took more than $60. I felt that if I'm going to get in trouble and I need to be accountable for everything I've done, I could have been $60. Hey, and that's a misdemeanor. Yeah. But no, $3,500 was a felony. And it said mayor's son arrested for embezzlement. And I did embezzle money from the company I worked at. And it was collectively of, I want to say, a life that I had lived. And I wasn't happy. I was a kid. And
how old were you?
Choices. How old am I now?
No. How old were you?
20. I'm not great with math.
Young 20s or old 20s? That's okay.
I'm going to say young 20s. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was in 1980. It's so funny as I had to. Do you know what global entry is? When you go to the airport.
Yeah.
And you can pass through. Like, if you have global entry, you got to just walk past everybody and go hi. I finally got approved for global entry a month ago.
Wow.
The first time I applied, they denied me because I had a criminal arrest. But I had that expunged. The felony, I had paid restitution. I had done my time. I had done my community service. I had worked the freeways, which, if anybody just wants a moment of humanity, work the freeways. Mm-hmm. You come across human remains. You are stepping in human feces, and you are looking at lives that people create in the underpasses of bridges.
So, and I would say that is geographically dependent, because I also had to when I got sober, and I don't know, that might be true in some parts of Nashville that I didn't go to, but I had to do a bunch as well, but I didn't see. I think that, because the lack of extreme weather that you have here makes it more possible for people.
Oh, people. Yeah. I mean, I don't to come across human remains under a freeway underpass or an overpass. You're like, what the?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting is being, as I said, being sober now for 19 years is there was a very successful judge in Burbank, and his son and I were like, hey, and we're cleaning the freeways together. He would bring a gram of cocaine as we were doing our restitution and working the freeways. And we would zip.
Sure.
And we were high off our asses. He committed suicide as an addict. And it like that could have been me.
Yeah.
You know, that could have been me. You know, I don't.
Do you remember what, like, so speaking about
as I've been all over the map, and I'm sorry.
Well, it actually, I feel like while you've been all over the map, it all has been very cohesive in its way that it needed to be. So,
because people say I'm crazy when I talk, and then people also say that I forget big points. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and you may have forgotten big points, but I feel like you brought up some great points. So that's what matters. And
you have great hair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I feel like we talked about it, but
there's a good point.
I
think that was before the cameras were rolling. So thanks for making sure that the audience knows you.
And great beard game.
Thank you.
Wait, I'm going to fix my belt clip.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
When was the first time you remember being so unhappy or uncomfortable in your own skin that it led to a behavior that changed the way you felt?
I think when my parents divorced. You know, I don't remember. I remember my mom was going to leave my dad when I was 11. She stayed. They stayed till we were 16. They should have never been married. They should have never had kids. You know, being one of three, we all have our positions.
Sure.
I have always felt that everything was my fault. I have always felt that if I wasn't here, if I didn't do it, everybody else would be okay. You know, we all have our fears. And for me, people are my biggest fear. It's gotten better, but they are my biggest fear. And I think, you know.
Can you go elaborate a little bit more on that? What you mean by people being your biggest fear?
People aren't going to like me. That scares me. My father, I never heard my father say, I love you. So I'm a product of what he was taught.
And he never heard his father say, I love you to him either.
Fast forward to, there was so much pain and there was so much fear and so much sadness. I just didn't want to be alive at all. Like there were moments that I just didn't want to be alive anymore. And the voices were so loud about how bad I was, how fat I was, how horrible I am, that I believed that I was just a piece of shit. And I believed that we are products of our first thought. When I was a kid, I remember my very first thought is my mom coming in. She had black hair, and she was coming in, and Lawrence, my brother, was sitting right next to me. I remember her face coming to get me. She moved to get Lawrence. So my first thought is, what about me? Like, no one picks me. And that's like, even still, like, yes, you picked me. Thank you for letting me be here. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, just pick me. And that is debilitating to me. And up until me getting sober and up until me doing the work and years of therapy and, you know, before this, primal screaming, going through every self-help seminar I can go to realize that there is an outlet, that there is an out, that there is something, and that, hey, the world's not going to pick you. Pick yourself.
That's what I was going to ask you, is that
pick yourself.
Was there a point where you realized the fear was there of not being picked, and therefore you also hadn't been picking yourself?
Sure, I I just had a great job where I picked myself, and it worked out in my favor. I was doing a self-help seminar, and it was called Insight, and we had this process of the world is coming to an end. It's a magical spaceship, and only 8 people can survive. And there were like 40 of us in there, and so it was my turn, and then
you had to choose yourself and 7 others?
Well, we had to pick 8 people.
Oh.
So I picked 8 moms, because I'm very much a mama's boy, and I believe to this day still that maybe there was something I could have done to save my mom, who died 25 years ago. I was a kid. She was 58. Who dies at 58? That's just, I mean, people do, and my heart goes out to them, but my mom died at fucking 58.
Right.
I shouldn't have lived my life without my mom. And so I picked 8 moms. And then her name was Deborah Allen. She said, okay, you have to stop now. And I said, but no, I'm not done. There's more moms. And she said, my dear Gregory, why didn't you pick yourself? And I went, I didn't know I could. Like, what? I didn't know I could. So that's the moment that wrecked me. Because I'm like, what? I could pick me? And I had no clue, Patrick. I don't.
You're a full-grown adult at this point.
I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Like, what? I can save myself. And it was the beginning of this trajectory. I used to have so much self-loathing. And it wasn't that I was trying to hurt myself, but I just wanted for the mania to stop. Like, at least, sometimes like if you walk into a door or you stub your toe, you're like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the jar I made you smell before we started recording. When you're spinning out into the future, or your thoughts are going. So
you did judge me.
I didn't judge you, but you're a human being. There's not a person in my orbit. Listen, I use that thing all the time.
I'm taking it with me because I brought my own water.
But I mean, like, the ability to just bring yourself to center, like.
But I was brought up believing that if I can dance as fast as I can, I won't get in trouble. I was brought up believing that, okay, it's Lawrence's turn, or maybe it's Vincent's turn. It's what he was taught. My parents didn't talk to each other. You didn't talk. There was no, and I remember, I need to just share the beauty of the other side of it. Our mom passed away at 58, diagnosed in November, died in June. I was trashed when she died. And then here's the beautiful part of life for me. A year later, on the anniversary of her passing, we went to leave flowers for her at her plot. We grabbed hands, the boys and dad grabbed hands, and he stood there when it was his turn to say something, and I'll never forget, tears were hitting his glasses. And he just said, I'm sorry. And you see this moment of humanity. And you're like, wait a minute, what? And that's the moment it changed with him. Like, it changed. And he passed away 13 years ago. He called me the day before my 6th AA birthday. And he said, I want to give you your cake. The beautiful part of sobriety and wanting to do something different is my sponsor had me going through the 4 steps, and we're talking about my dad, and this is what happened. It made me unlovable. It made me afraid. It made me all these things. And my sponsor, Tim, said, so then what was your part in this? It's 4 columns. And who it was, what happened, how did it make you feel, and what was your part in it? And I said, finally, and the tears are pouring down my face, and okay, no one's ever talked about this, and I'm sobbing, and he goes, what is your part in this? And I said, I was a little boy, what is my part? And he said, you're still talking about it. And I went, he said, it's not who you are, it's what happened. So what can you do from that? And that moment I went, wow, it is what happened. I now have a man in front of me, my dad, that changed for us. You know, they say that people don't change, he changed for us. When I think of my dad, I don't think of what happened. I think of, God, I miss my dad. Like, I'm married, Dad. Dad, I'm married. I've been nominated for an Emmy as an actor. You told me I wouldn't make it. Not that he didn't believe in me, he just didn't want me to get hurt.
Right.
And then when I think of all the times that, you know, my dad, he didn't want to see his children hurt. So he was just doing to us what was done to him. Mm-hmm. And my dad's biggest fault was loving me too hard. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, because loving you was shown through ways that caused pain.
He never thought that he was hurting me.
Right.
He just wanted to scare me.
Right.
He was afraid of the world hurting his kid.
Yeah.
And so so it's what happened. It's not who I am.
With all of that happening, you don't feel like you have carried forward the same coping mechanisms that he was raised with and that he raised you with.
No.
How did you change that?
Therapy. I forgave my dad. Like, I can talk about it, and
so much of the time it's exactly what you just said, that they did all they could do. If they had the capability to do something different, they would have.
You know, as my sponsor says, he says, you came out of it alive. And there's like, even in the perfect families, you come out of it alive.
Right.
You know, and the difference is I truly believe, had it been different back then, that we could talk about things, that we could say, hey, this is what, you know, my dad just wanted to be our hero. He didn't have a father that said, do this, do this, do this. So my father was like, well, what do you mean? I didn't do that.
Right.
Because he wanted to be perfect for his children. I can't speak for him. I can't own any of his choices. What I can do is say that my dad did love his kids. And he, it was important for him to do things differently.
That's so beautiful. That you received that.
It's what happened. It's not who we are.
Exactly.
And a lot of people are so afraid to live life without that. Mm-hmm. But how free.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to say this. I miss my parents. When I think of my parents, I wish they were sitting there when I was nominated for my Emmy. I wish they were standing next to me and they gave me away for my wedding. I wish they could see how happy I am and how good I am and how grateful I am for everything they did for their children, even the missteps. Because I refuse to resent them for them doing what they thought they could. And they were both hanging on by the seat of their pants as well.
But you know what's beautiful about that is that you are doing, I think, the best thing that you could do, which is healing yourself and then being vocal about what happened and the healing process. Because by doing that on this platform, and I'm sure in the realms of your life where you are standing up and being honest, you're helping to heal the generations that are coming after.
Talk about it. Ask questions. One thing it's important for me is, like, ask your parents. Hey, what was it like growing up? What was it like? Hey, did you guys ever talk about this? Hey, what is that? You know, I even would say to my nephews, ask your dad, ask your mom, ask questions.
Yeah.
Talk about it. And there's nothing wrong with having a conversation, because all you're doing is like, hey, what was it like when you were a kid? Dad, what was it like when you were a kid growing up in a war-torn country where your mother was afraid that somebody was going to take you and possibly hurt you? My aunt is still alive, and I ask her these questions. I just saw her last week for an hour. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So we've touched on the fact that, you know, your pain evolved into addiction.
Sure.
What brought you to a place of getting sober, and what did that look like, if you could?
I called my twin one night, and he called me, and I was drunk, like possibly like functioning blackout drunk. He was at his house. He said, I think I'm having a heart attack. Come get me. I was honestly looking for a hookup online. Oh, God damn it. So I went to his house, found him. He had partied too hard. We both thought he was going to die, and I thought, well, at least let's let the twins go down together. So as I would go inside and get him cold compresses, I was just polishing off vodka. We both survived that moment. He went to a recovery program. And rehab. I call it camp. And I had been drinking so much that I was physically losing blood. I was in Al-Anon, and I was calling my sponsor. And I had checked in a couple times a week, and every time I called, I was telling her how hungover I was, And one night I'm watering my twin brother's garden and he was in rehab, and I told my Al-Anon sponsor that I would meet her at a meeting. And I was so tired of just being tired. And it wasn't, so I showed up at the meeting. I was still very drunk from the night before, and I sat next to her. I got a welcome chip, and it was in this building. We had to go downstairs to our cars. And I walked out and I fell to my knees and I just started crying. And I haven't had a drink since. I was so, you know what? I was so tired of being angry. I was so tired of hating myself. I was so tired of being tired.
Yeah.
You know, I had smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 years. I was super unhealthy, and I just, you know, this in sobriety we say the grace of God. I had that one moment of grace, and I haven't had a drink since. And I can't imagine having a cocktail.
So as you're sitting here and thinking about your own journey and healing, looking back at your parents, do you still think that your parents should not have had kids?
I'm glad they did, because I wouldn't be here. You know, my parents didn't know they were having twins. Together we weighed 9 point something pounds. Our heartbeats were in sync. Lawrence came out, and 7 minutes later I came out. And I almost died at birth, and there's been a few times that I've almost died. And so I really do believe that there's a higher purpose for me to be here. And I don't, you know, and here's what I love. I also get to talk about my parents. And my parents were cool. My mom, we would take my mom to events, and my twin and I would waltz with our mom. We would go to, I've been modeling for over 25 years, and my mom would come with me to my big fashion shows, and the clients would save seats because they're like, Gregory's bringing his mom. Wow. And, you know, we would then go to things with our dad, and I'd be like, my dad's the mayor. And he was known as the people's mayor. And he was a very staunch Republican, yet he was also so liberal in his conversations. He would say, let me understand why I need to vote for you. And he voted for Proposition 8 so that his children could live a healthy life with the people that I love. And he was open to the conversation. Help me with what that is. Help me, you know, I don't want someone to hurt you. And to see these two people that came to this country, you know, I was brought up, this is a gift for me. I am a guest in this country. And how lucky that because of what they went through, I get to have the life that I have. How grateful am I? So
well,
it's
not only that, but I think the perspective that's big, that's absolutely clear that you live with every day. Well, that's a gift. I mean, you don't have to have that perspective. And I mean, it's truly beautiful.
I miss my parents.
Yeah.
So when I think of them, I miss them.
So we're out of time, and I want to ask you this as I always do. Most important question, I think, for that person or people that have resonated with your story. What last word of encouragement would you like to leave with them?
You are not alone. We have this, when I was drinking and drugging and a teenager, and by all means I shouldn't be alive, I didn't have the internet. You didn't talk about things. I had an identical twin, and we were so afraid of it together that maybe we had mentioned things, but we were so afraid and fighting for ourselves. Have a conversation, talk to somebody, get onto the internet and Google, hi, I am struggling with my sexuality. People, kids and adults commit suicide from online bullying.
Yeah.
It's a global pandemic. People are so afraid to love who they love, be who they are. But there is such a huge world. There is the Trevor Project. I'm an ambassador to an amazing company called Free to Love, an organization, Free to Love. The woman, Tanya, who owns it, went to high school together. Free to love. Who you love is not my business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we are free to love in this time and place. And there are millions of outlets to find somebody who will put their hand out and grab it.
That's right.
For anybody that's listening that wants to reach out to me, please do. Everything is at Gregory Zarian. It's simple. Here's my hand. Let's have a conversation. And it's one blink at a time.
Gregory Zarian, thank you so much. This has been, my heart is full. This has been a lot, this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me to the party.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I come back?
You can absolutely come back. And I want it to be in Nashville, so we're going to make it happen.
Can I wear some other pants?
And
I like the shirt too.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you that have tuned into this episode. We're so grateful that you are with us and that you chose to do so. And I'll remind each and every one of you that it's never too late to start loving yourself. And you're always only one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.